I'm Aseel. I head up the e-commerce and industry practice at Frazer Jones.
And I'm Nick Arnold, so I head up our specialist division covering rewards as well as HR tech, people analytics and global mobility.
Amazing. So we're here today to talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the market. I think we can both agree it's been a little bit of an unpredictable 18 months in recruitment.
Yep, a little bit kind of patchy and, some great wins, some great successes here and there, but other areas a little bit more challenging, right?
I completely agree. I think what we've noticed this year is a real shift in momentum. There's been a real change in gear in terms of like the urgency, the caliber, and the volume of roles that we're supporting clients on at the moment.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think there's probably a tale of two halves with our different areas, right? So in the specialist functions, we performed really well last year. Market was super buoyant, and then this year, there's been patches, as I said, where there's been some great volume of roles, and then almost spells where we'd expect it to be a bit busier for certain points of the year, and it hasn't quite delivered. Q1 within the specialist areas of rewards and tech and analytics as well, Q1 performed pretty well. In fact, overperformed really for that time of year. We often see people locked into year-end activities, going through pay review, etc., and it takes a bit of a back seat, the hiring activity in that world. Q2 normally kicks on, and it didn't quite kick on. It didn't take a huge dive or anything, but we didn't quite see the volume of roles we were hoping for, I guess. Whereas I think your world, there's been a lot more activity in more generalist HR positions, right?
Yeah, and just going back to what you said about kind of tech and analytics, I think, we're seeing a huge demand for really, really high caliber kind of HR operations leaders who understand how to integrate new AI technology, know how to optimize efficiencies, all of that stuff. And we're seeing a huge demand for really high caliber talent, which we are truly finding through our passive network, through the events we run, through the constant engagement that we have we stay close to our candidate network throughout the year. And sometimes you stay close to a candidate for years before they're ready to look. But so, you've got to kind of stay on it because it's really hard to find the right skills in that area at the moment, but there's such a high demand for them.
So you're speaking to a lot of CPOs, heads of HR, etc. Would you say that kind of data and creating insights through analytics is pretty high on the agenda at the moment?
It's everything. And I think, data fluency and data competency, like all organizations are moving to their kind of data-driven decisions, and they've got to have the right technology in place in order to gather and analyze that data. There's a few organizations that are really nailing it, but the problem with them is that now everyone wants those individuals to be headhunted and move to other organizations. So it's a little bit of a competitive market out there for the candidates with the right skills, especially in the AI space.
It's really interesting because in the people analytics world, last year, 2024, we basically saw a lot of businesses hiring dedicated people for those roles and even building out specialist people analytics functions. The direction of travel was super promising in that area. Whereas this year, it seems like those skills are being incorporated into the HR ops positions and other HR roles as opposed to actually hiring in those dedicated specialists. We've even seen people made redundant in that area, or those dedicated people analytics functions kind of being included into IT teams a little bit more. It's interesting as almost the actual specialists that purely do those roles have kind of taken a bit of a back seat, and they're trying to get that skill set incorporated, I guess, in the other HR roles instead. But I think from talking to a lot of people in the market, that sounds like it might shift a little bit, and I think there'll be a demand for those dedicated people analysts probably in the second half of the year and certainly going into next year. But I think with the conscious effort for businesses to drive down costs a little bit, I think they've been trying to focus on driving, upskilling people within the other HR roles, almost to get them wearing many hats rather than getting in those specialist people as much.
Yeah, well, what I'm seeing, especially from my tech clients, is the kind of coming together of the IT function and the HR function. So just going back to what you said, we've seen some kind of like unusual reporting lines. Maybe, an HR operations individual is reporting into chief information officer, or, a chief AI officer. That's a role that's kind of a kind of new kid on the block. And I think the two functions speaking to each other and integrating more as functions is a game changer. In the old days, you'd see HR on one side and IT on the other, often butting heads over what the direction of travel should be. And now what we're seeing is companies that are succeeding are looking at those structures and kind of dissolving the barriers. And, to truly succeed, HR and IT, they've got to be partnering closer together. They've got to be pretty much in each other's pockets in order to kind of achieve their goals.
Well, I think you're exactly right. That piece on collaboration, that's the businesses are doing that, and kind of integrating those teams in the right way are succeeding, right? Because I think there's almost been a bit of back and forth where some businesses almost pulling those analysts out of the IT function and making sure they've got the actual people, HR skills, and as I said, building those people analytics functions. And then we've kind of seen it flip back and they're just pushing them back into IT teams, and that's actually ruffling some feathers, causing some people to leave or be a little bit unhappy in those roles. But the businesses that are creating a better relationship where everyone works well together, they're succeeding, I think.
We've seen our TA network really struggle in pockets over the last sort of 24 months. And I think it's incredibly heartwarming and motivating and exciting to see them getting back into work. We've had more TA roles this quarter than I shouldn't say this, but we probably had last year, for half the year put together. We're not going to get into it, but the geopolitical landscape is what it is. There's so much uncertainty. There's so much financial and political uncertainty out there. It's not going to die down. In fact, this might be the best it's going to be. So organizations are just kind of getting on with it. They're just saying, this is the world. We are navigating uncertainty. Let's just go. Let's just hire. Let's just get these people in. So I've seen a huge demand across my team for really solid talent acquisition professionals. And we're absolutely over the moon to have roles to talk to our network about as well, because they've had a really tough time lately.
In my world, at least, within the specialist functions, because they are quite niche roles, I think typically organisations lean on agencies a lot for that expertise that we bring right in the deep network, whereas we have seen a trend of businesses really utilising their internal TA teams a lot more, which is obviously great in many ways. That has resulted in them making more hires in that space. But I think it's probably impacted a few processes, if I'm honest, from what we've seen in our areas in the market. Some roles being advertised quite a long period of time and going around the houses a little bit, and because they haven't got that deep expertise of those areas, they kind of go a bit back and forth on what the salary should be and the type of profile they need in the post. So I think roles are taking longer to fill, if they're taking that direct approach at least.
So just to kind of round up, much healthier market, happy recruiters with lots of jobs to work, really good client relationships. Those years of staying close to our candidate network, I've talked about this before, but through the high caliber events we run, the roundtables, the webinars, talk you down off a ledge, like emergency coffee mornings that we have, we kind of drop everything for our network. And I think it's really paying off now, because we've positioned ourselves in a way that we really know what's going on in the market. We really know who's looking to move, who's, what the potential kind of moves are within key firms that we support. And, we're kind of capitalizing on that now.
I think for me, it's super promising what's to come from a hiring activity perspective, right? You've had loads of success this year. The volume of roles you've been getting on is super high. Specialist functions a little bit tougher compared to last year at least, but still pretty healthy activity. But from talking to a lot of people in my network, there seems to be a lot of candidates sat there wanting a move, wanting to hear about the exciting things going on in the market, but maybe being a bit cautious in their approach. From my experience over the years, the longer that goes on, all of a sudden, if the market picks up a little bit more, you get this bit of a snowball effect, right, where everyone starts moving around. And anyone who's out there kind of thinking, maybe the market's not as good in the world of reward and people analytics at the moment, I think it's only going to pick up basically, and the early signs are really good.
I appreciate that, commerce and industry is a huge umbrella term for pretty much, this is how I describe it to my network, everything that's not financial or professional services, pretty much. So tell me a little bit about drilling down into that. Have you got any insights to share relating to kind of different subsectors within commerce and industry?
Probably on the whole, it's been a fairly even spread of activity across the various subsectors, I would say. However, 2024, I think there was a bit of a downturn in some activity in the retail space, for example, and we've certainly seen that pick up a little bit this year. We've seen some pretty good activity within the medtech space. Pharmaceuticals has been fairly promising. I think last year we saw some good activity within Some of the more heavy industries like manufacturing, chemical manufacturing seem to have a buzz of activity at some point.
Yeah, and especially nationwide as well, because we obviously cover the whole country.
Yeah, exactly. So we saw quite a bit of activity in Scotland, for example, hiring up there, whereas that's probably tailed off a little bit more recently. I mean, my view is that we've seen a lot of promising hiring activity in maybe smaller boutiques, some of the lesser known brands and startups that are pushing on, whereas actually the bigger PLCs and like the really well-known big tech giants, there's probably been less activity of hiring there.
We've got a really good network in the kind of Series A to D space, I want to say, within technology. But yeah, I hear you, like retail, you know, there's some really cool e-com businesses out there that, you know, would fall under our kind of retail umbrella, but they're not kind of bricks and mortar as we know them. But even within the traditional retail space, there's some really phenomenal activity going on with kind of really radical thinking, like reinventing traditional businesses to make them future-proof. So we're really excited and privileged to be part of those journeys.
Well, it goes back to saying about it's so hard to predict at the moment, and yeah, some great areas of success in the commerce and industry market. You can't really sit here and say this subsector is doing really well and this area is not, because there's certain businesses within each pocket that's doing really well, and others maybe that are kind of weathering storms a little bit, you know, a lot of restructuring going on.
Absolutely, and it all goes back to kind of, you know, we follow our relationships as recruitment professionals at the firm, and we're heavily encouraged to do that. You know, we've got that kind of creative freedom to really follow our noses and follow our guts, and luckily it's paying off for us. So yeah, sure. Absolutely. Well, here's to a great second half of 2025.
Yeah.